Again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I appreciate what you stand for, and I look forward to kind of giving you a brief overview of what our priorities are going to be for the House Oversight Committee next year. We're still very optimistic, cautiously optimistic, that we're going to flip the House. I think that, the elections always tighten up towards the end, and since Bush versus Gore, we've been split down the middle in America. But I do believe that history's on our side with the midterm elections, the history of what happens with the president during their first midterm. This president is not exceptional, so I don't think that there's anything that they can change over the next 60 days that's going to really tilt the winds into their direction. So we're optimistic that we're going to flip the House. If we do that, I'm very hopeful that I'll be chairman of the House Oversight Committee. And I kind of want to give you an overview of what the mission of the House Oversight Committee is supposed to be about. The House Oversight Committee is supposed to be about trying to root out waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement in the federal government. That's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to also be the lead investigative committee. Now, if you look at what's happened over the last 4 years in the House Oversight Committee, especially the last 2 years, which happened to be the 2 years of the Biden administration, there has been absolutely zero oversight of this administration or any type of congressional spending. Zero oversight. And everything from an oversight standpoint for the past 4 years, including as we speak, is about two things. It's either about Donald Trump or harassing the private sector. Now, we're going to have a committee hearing later on today. Obviously, the Democrats are the majority. They set the agenda. The committee hearing today is on big oil. And if you go back a few months prior to gas prices really inflating, they had all the oil CEOs in front of the committee. They billed this as, the Democrats billed this as the committee this is going to be our hearing, like when Henry Waxman was chairman, and they had the tobacco CEOs in front. And they proved that the tobacco companies were misleading the public on nicotine and things like that. So they had them all in there. And it was all about, the title of that committee was Climate Disinformation Campaign. Well, they got, towards the end of the committee, they go in seniority. And if you look at the Democrat roster of the Oversight Committee, they have Ro Khanna, who's the head progressive in the conference. Then they have 4 of the 5 members of the squad. So a lot of press cover our committee hearings. They said the average committee hearing is 5 hours. So for the first 3 hours, you go through, good members they have. Maloney, I love Carolyn Maloney, the chairman of the committee, chairwoman of the committee. They have Jerry Conley, they have all the press just sits there. Then it starts getting to Ro Khanna and the squad. They get up and they start taking pictures and they turn their recorders on. So when it got to that point, they start asking the CEOs, will you pledge to cut production? Will you pledge to cut production? Which, number one, has nothing to do with congressional oversight, but number two, just kind of shows the disconnect, I think, between what that committee's role is and what the reality of our economy is. We believe on the Republican side that we should increase production. We believe that we should unleash the potential of the American energy industry. Now, we believe that there should be rules and regulations in place. We don't want any bad actors who are going to pollute the air, pollute the water, or anything like that. But we believe that we have those safeguards in place, and if people violate the public trust, then they should be held accountable. That's the position for the Republicans on the House Oversight Committee. So when Donald Trump was president, there were dozens and dozens of not just cabinet secretaries, but high-level cabinet officials who came before the Oversight Committee. They were asked to come, threatened with subpoenas, some were subpoenaed. They came before the House Oversight Committee. Under the Biden administration, there have been 0 cabinet secretaries and 0 high-level Biden administration officials before the House Oversight Committee. 0 in 2 years. And that's unfortunate. So what are the priorities for 2023? Now, again, if you read the I don't normally encourage people to read Politico or Roca, but they did a really good feature of me a couple of weeks ago. I highly recommend it. If you need a copy of it, Caroline Castro. It was a pleasant surprise. But you know, what I want to do, we're going to be focused on government oversight, and we're going to be the lead investigative body for the House of Representatives. All the press that we will get will be about the investigative part. I want to begin, I'll conclude by telling you what our priorities are for investigations coming out of the gate, but I want to begin by telling you I'm passionate about rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. I believe that somebody needs to be in Washington to get the backs of the taxpayers. The taxpayers are being fleeced. This has been ongoing, not just under the Biden administration, but for decades here. We cannot continue down the path of spending this deficit spending where we're spending significantly more than we're taking in. We cannot continue down this path. It is unsustainable. And there are good government programs. You know, there are industries and companies that benefited from programs like the PPP loan program. But that program was also grossly abused. The amount of fraud. Yet this committee has not looked into anything on that. The unemployment insurance, the scams from that are breathtaking. These are the things that we're going to look into. We're also passionate about the fact that the private sector is being held back by the federal government. There is a role for the government because unfortunately there are always going to be bad actors. There need to be rules and regulations in place to prevent bad actors and to hold bad actors accountable. But if you look at what's happened, especially over the last 2 years, the rules and regulations are holding our economy back. They're holding the private sector back. And we want to hold hearings, especially in the subcommittees, to where we focus on industry problems. You know, what are the roadblocks for this industry? What are the roadblocks from a government standpoint? We want to put a price tag on those. And we don't just want to identify the problems, because the Oversight Committee has always in the past been fairly good about identifying problems, but we want to propose solutions to the problem. So I'm going to have a close working relationship with the chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, with the chair of Ways and Means Committee, with the chair of Financial Services Committee, and we're going to work together. We're going to work on oversight, and we're going to work with them to solve the problems, not just identify the problems, but propose solutions and try to pass and implement those solutions. So I'm excited about the things we're going to do on the Oversight Committee from a private sector standpoint, from a taxpayer standpoint. We're going to do some good things. We're going to be the most active committee from a subcommittee standpoint. The subcommittees are going to be very substantive. They're going to be very focused on what we can do to make government more efficient, to identify fraudulent, obsolete government programs that need to be eliminated or reformed, and do everything we can to work to solve those problems. We're going to actually follow through. So I want you to know that, because you will not read about that in Politico or see that on Fox or CNN. But what you will see on Fox and CNN and Politico and Roll Call on the Hill are our investigations. And we're going to have some very high-profile investigations right out of the gate in a Republican majority in January. And the three areas where we're going to be focused on, and the one that's, I think, received the most attention, I'll start with that, is the Biden family investigation. I have said for months that we believe Hunter Biden is a national security risk. I have been saying lately that it's not just Hunter Biden. It's also members of the Biden family. And what we have been able to prove and publicize are the fact that if you're into banking, and I was a director of a bank, I'm a fourth generation director of a community bank, had always been involved in banking. There's a thing called suspicious activity reports. If you're involved in banking, you know what I'm talking about, a SARS. Nobody gets SARS. Okay, SARS were put into place when George W. Bush was president to try to identify foreign transactions that were coming in to fund American terror cells. Okay, now over time, the FBI and law enforcement have expanded SARS to include things like money laundering. But if someone gets if someone has a sanction against them, if you're the Mexican drug cartel, if you watch Ozark, Remember, he wanted off that list?
No.
The reason he wants off that list is if one of us do a transaction with him, we're going to get a suspicious activity report. And that's not good. That means our bank account's frozen. And no bank, a bank has to report a suspicious activity report. Now, let's think about this. You're all from the private sector. The bank has to fill out a form and say, we believe our client is involved in a possible criminal activity. And they send that to Treasury. Then the bank examiners roll in. Now, I can assure you, I don't care if you're my community bank or if you're Wells Fargo, you don't want to do anything to get the bank examiners in. It would be like one of my coal companies calling the EPA, hey, I don't know, but I think we may have a little leak here or something. You want to come down here? That's not the way it works, okay? So nobody wants a bank examiner. And if you're a bank president or a bank director, you don't want to file a suspicious activity report against a good customer, you know, because that's going to make that customer mad if they're innocent. Now imagine if your customer is the son of the Vice President of the United States. You're going to make pretty darn sure that that person's guilty of what you're accusing them of. Hunter Biden had 150 suspicious activity reports filed from numerous banks. Numerous banks. This was put into place when George Bush was president. The reason they put them into place is when those terrorists threw the planes through the World Trade Center, looking back, there were all these signs. They were getting wires from Saudi Arabia and places like this. How did law enforcement not know it? It was put into place so everyone could communicate. Hey, these wires are coming in from this country that we have sanctions against. You know, why is Syria wiring this guy money? You know, why is this guy doing transactions with Russian oligarchs, with Chinese energy companies? You know, what's going on here? These are very extensive transactions, by the way. And Congress had access to those. That was put into the law. These were to be transparent. Your privacy rules went out the window if you got a suspicious activity report. Under Bush, Obama, and Trump, any member of Congress could get these suspicious activity reports. Joe Biden comes in at the very beginning and changes some rules, a lot of rules. One of the rules he changes, Congress no longer has access to suspicious activity reports. Well, at the time, it didn't get any media attention because he changed so many rules, and you know, they canceled the Keystone Pipeline, he halted the construction of the border wall. So this didn't receive any print, and honestly, what I've learned, 99% of the members of Congress don't even know what a suspicious activity report is. And the media sure doesn't know what it is. They do now, but they didn't then. Well, when we figured this out, we start talking about it. So we request a suspicious activity report. Oh, you can't have it. Biden's changed the rules. So we've requested from Treasury, because that's where this thing starts, Treasury. And they've denied us access to it and basically sent a letter saying, well, you're in the minority, you don't have access to that. And I'm thinking, well, that's going to change in about 2 months. You might as well start digging that stuff up for us. But anyway, we're dealing with a lot of whistleblowers. And I can tell you, this is not some Adam Schiff conspiracy theory. This is factual information. And, you know, I know the Democrats know they have a Hunter Biden problem because I was in the Rules Committee this week, and they had 3 bills that went through our committee. I was opposed to all 3 bills. They called them good government bills. I can assure you they were not good government bills. And every point I made in Rules Committee, if you've ever watched a Rules Committee meeting, it's like the Supreme Court, you know, they just start firing on you. They argued with every little thing that I said that didn't amount to a hill of beans. Then Tom Cole asked me about investigations. I started going into great detail what I've just mentioned about Hunter Biden. They're sitting there. Jamie Raskins is in there. When have you ever known Jamie Raskins not to want to? He's just sitting there on his phone like he's not hearing me, you know. So they know they have a problem. And I think that this will be a very high-profile hearing, and I think that it'll be very informative and very damaging for this administration. So that's one of the high-profile investigative hearings. Another high-profile investigative hearing that we're going to have, and we've been a lead agency on, is the COVID origination. Our committee's the one that unearthed the emails that showed initially that Dr. Fauci's earliest advisors in February, March of 2020 had emailed him saying, look, this is obviously a man-made virus, and so it had to come from the Wuhan lab because that's what we're doing down there. You know, we're researching COVID viruses and things like that. Then after that, they met and a phone call. They never emailed again. And those early advisors then signed off on a memo that said anybody that thinks this is a lab leak is a conspiracy theorist. And that's what they told the Trump administration all the way on, when we should have been rolling in there trying to figure out what was going on in that lab. I could go into a lot more detail on that, but we've also unearthed emails that showed Fauci and Collins were communicating, trying to spin the lab leak theory, trying to dispel that. When today, I don't think there's very many credible Americans, especially the medical community, that think that came from anywhere but the Wuhan lab. It was very unfortunate that they were doing everything in their ability to hide and to dispel the lab leak theory. Then we proved that taxpayer dollars were going to that Wuhan lab through EcoHealth Alliance. So our committee's been the leader in that, and we're going to continue to be the leader in trying to get to the bottom of the origination of COVID and hold people accountable for wrongdoing. The last big issue, and then I'll turn it over for questions, is the border crisis, and it is a crisis. I've led 2 trips to the border with the Republicans on the Oversight Committee. And I mean, it's mind-boggling what's going on. To hear the Vice President of the United States say to Chuck Todd that we have a secure border, that is probably the most dishonest thing that has ever been uttered by anyone in the administration. And we've had some doozies just in the 6 years I've been here, in both administrations. So, you know, we cannot continue to allow this fentanyl that's pouring across the border. We cannot continue to pay to transport, house, provide health care, cell phones, public education for all of these illegal immigrants coming across that border. It has to stop, and we're going to do everything in our ability to see that happens in a Republican majority. So those are the 3 big investigative hearings. I want you to know we're going to be focused also on substantive stuff to try to help the private sector and get the government off the backs of the private industries, the job creators, and the risk takers in America. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions if anybody has.
Thinking about your probable, leadership position next year in agencies, agencies that come to the top of your mind on needing the most oversight and reform when it comes to the private sector and businesses. I'm sure the list is long, but are there some that are just have either so consequential abuses or mismanagement, or some that are just so widespread? But just when you think about the different agencies, what is top of mind?
There are so many. There are some that are worse than others. EPA is always going to be at the top of the list for a million reasons. Then you have agencies like the FDA. We've met with many medical device manufacturers that are very frustrated because the FDA is very far behind on that. There are food companies that are very frustrated with the FDA. We have pharmaceutical companies, medical companies that are very disappointed in the FDA. So the FDA has said they've been, very occupied with COVID vaccines for a long time, and I know there are other committees that are obsessed with the vaccine. We're frustrated with the FDA from a sense that they're holding progress back. They're not on schedule, and we're going to have the FDA in front of the committee early on to talk about, and with private sector people, medical device companies. We mentioned, there's a big industry in Kentucky, the CBD industry, but for better or worse, there are a lot of questions and uncertainty in that industry that can be easily resolved by the FDA. So the FDA is going to be in front of the committee. Corps of Engineers. Every member of Congress that has to do with the Corps of Engineers will tell you that's the worst. Of course, they're in the military, so they for whatever reason, think they can get away with a lot of things. They're probably the reason earmarks are coming back, because they do not comply with orders from Congress, appropriation requests, things like that. So the Corps of Engineers we're going to have in front of the committee. You go down the line, the Department of Education. There's a high level of frustration with quality of public education. It's not just that the teachers unions kept a lot of inner city schools shut down way too long. It's the fact that, and it's not just the CRT and all that. Our public education, the product that's coming out of our public education system, I have 3 kids in public school, it's just an inferior product. And it's not a money thing. It's the money's there, it's just so misappropriated. So we've got, Virginia Fox is on the Oversight Committee, so she will either be the current chairman of education or the former chairman of the education committee. We're gonna have her, is one of the leaders in that. We've got a lot of issues with the student loan program, not just Joe Biden's latest student loan debt repayment scam, but we have a lot of issues with that. You know, it's like the easier you make college loans available to kids, the more the universities raise tuition on the kids. You know, so there's a problem with education from kindergarten to post-secondary that we want to focus on. And we have, obviously, we've had a lot of whistleblowers come forward with border patrol issues. Again, that goes back to the lack of border security. Jim Jordan's on the committee, so we're working together on a lot of FBI issues that you see in the news. So, you know, the list goes on and on. There's no shortage of bureaucracies. The VA still has and the IRS still have a significant percentage of their employees working from home because of COVID, believe it or not. So, you know, that's part of the backlog problem with the IRS. Isn't just because they don't have enough employees, it's because they've been working from home. So I could go on, but we're gonna have, and they're gonna be primarily in front of subcommittees. So again, the subcommittees are gonna be very substantive committee here.